But understandably so. Behavioral changes are typically the most difficult. And any person who has been accustomed to behaving in a particular way, in this case, driving a car, using a private vehicle, it's not so easy to convince him or her to make that shift to public transport. Right? And I can understand a little bit because I'm also a driver. I've used public transport quite extensively in the past when I didn't have to move around so much. But now, in my present job, when I have to travel to quite a few different places in a particular day, I understand the difficulty if one were to rely largely on public transport or solely on public transport to do so. So therefore, people who give feedback and say that it is not so easy, my job needs this, my family circumstances, I can understand why that is so. The difficulty, of course, is that in Singapore, with land being as scarce as it is and roads already taking up 12% of the space compared to 14% for housing, well, expanding the road infrastructure probably means us having to live closer together, less space for greenery, for parks and so on. And I think we don't want to do that. So difficult though it is for some to make that transition, I think we need to work harder to make it as convenient as possible, as conducive as possible for them to do so. Which is why we're putting so much effort into this Land Transport Master Plan, the revised version that has come out this year, spelling out a vision for the long term, but also making sure that people understand and know that we are fully committed to addressing some of the short-term and immediate issues. Right? Increasing capacity, delivering a more reliable service, making sure that the buses come more regularly, less crowded, invested significant sums of money in that direction, buying more trains, continuing to build more lines. So that's really as much for the short term, and in the longer term, the vision is to put more people to live within closer proximity to a train station so that they can choose to either walk, maybe take a short bicycle ride, or if they wish to, take a feeder to a station. And hopefully, if we have better connectivity to where they need to go to, if we have a higher quality of service, I think we can make public transport a more viable alternative for more Singaporeans. First of all, you've got to be able to categorize the criticism, because there is some that is quite destructive, very personal, and some of that you ought to just, put aside and not pay too much attention to it. But the others, more in line of feedback rather than direct criticisms, and I think we should pay attention, we should look at them and see how we can improve. So that's the first thing. But the second thing also is to remember to have a thick skin and a tender heart, not a thin skin and a hard heart. Right? Because if we have a thin skin and a hard heart, then I think we are probably not quite suitable to do what we need to do. But a thick skin and a tender heart, that's something that I try to constantly remind myself. Pay attention to what others say, put some thought on it. Where it's valid, where it's something that we can improve on, we ought to try and take it on board as much as we can. Okay, bearing in mind that we are doing it for the greater good of the public. Well, I've been in politics now for the last 7.5 years. Why am I still in politics? I suppose the simplest way to express it would be maybe to borrow from a quote, because there's a couplet from Dickens that I remember well, and it comes to mind, and I let it percolate in my mind on an occasional basis. The first line says, "It is a far, far better thing I do than I've ever done." It is a far, far better thing I do than I've ever done. And I think that describes my last 7.5 years in politics. The second line actually says, "It is a far, far better rest I go to than I've ever known. Now, of course, they were talking about a different kind of rest. The rest that you find at the end of life's journey, right? But to me, it is also still valid because the rest that I seek is, I hope, infused with an abiding satisfaction, of having filled the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run.